welcome to our final video, video 8 in lesson 5-3. We are finally reaching the end of our journey through factoring. Now, we knew everyone would be upset if we did not include some word problems. We know those are your guys' favorite kind of problems, so we wanted to make sure that we incorporated some factoring word problems. That's what this video is going to cover. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to take a look at Jocelyn throwing a ball up with an initial velocity of 32 feet per second and an initial height of 240 feet. And then we want to use the equation h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus v naught t plus h naught. Now this is going to be a very common formula that we will be dealing with quadratics. You will see us refer back to this several times. This is your basic equation for a projectile motion, so anytime you're throwing a ball up in the air, kicking a ball up in the air, using a catapult or something like that, we're going to be reverting back to this formula. So we are asked to figure out when the ball is going to hit the ground. Now if you think about the ground, that is going to be where you are 0 feet above the ground. So our height that we want to look for is going to be 0. So we are going to plug in the 0 into the formula for the h of t. And I'll go ahead and do this over here first so that we can see where this is going to match up with. And then I'm going to have negative 16t squared. Now I need to plug in my initial velocity that they gave me of 32. And that's going to be 32t. And then my initial height, which is going to be how high we were when we threw the ball, which was 240 feet. So I'm just going to go ahead and transfer this over here so that we have a little bit more room to work with. And then we'll start our factoring process. Remember, the first thing we're going to want to do is look for a GCF. In this case, we do have a GCF. 16 will go into all three of these numbers evenly. And remember, we talked about we don't like having a negative out in front, so we're going to actually pull out a negative 16 on this when we do this. So we're going to pull out a negative 16. That's going to leave us with a positive t squared. It's going to leave us with a negative 2t, and it's going to leave us with a negative 15. So now I'm set up so that I can factor this. I'm going to look at the t squared term. It does not have a coefficient in front, so I'm going to lock in my variables of t and t on my beginning. I want to next check to see what signs that I'm going to need. I have a negative for my last term, and I have a negative for my middle term. So that means I'm going to need to have a positive and a negative number. And it's going to mean that since my number in the middle is negative, I want the bigger number to be my negative and my smaller number to be my positive. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in a plus and a minus. Now when I break down 15, I can get 1 in 15, and I can get 3 in 5. Remember, we want to go with the ones that are closest together first, and then we can plug in others if we need to. We already talked about how we want the negative to be the bigger number and the positive to be the smaller number. So when I multiply this out to check, that is going to give me a 3t, and it's going to give me a negative 5t. When I add those together, that is going to give me a negative 2t. So we have this factored correctly. Now we need to actually solve this. So I'm going to set each term equal to 0. We have t plus 3 equals 0. We have t minus 5 equals 0. And then we're going to have the negative 16 equals 0. But as we talked in other videos, we don't have any way that negative 16 can actually equal 0. So that's going to be no solution. We don't even really need to worry about that. Now we would subtract 3 from this one and get t is equal to negative 3. And we would add 5 to this one and get t is equal to a positive 5. Now, as always with word problems, we have to think about what kind of answers make sense. Now, our t, if you remember in this problem, is going to represent time. Now, looking at our two answers, we have a negative 3 and a positive 5. We cannot have negative time. We have yet to invent time travel. So that means our only solution that is actually going to be a valid solution for this situation is going to be that the t equals 5 seconds. That's going to be how long it takes to hit the ground. The negative 3 would be a 0, but it's going to be on the other side of the y-axis, so it's going to be where we're going to have negative time, which is not something that we're going to look at, so our answer is going to have to be positive anytime we're dealing with time. We do have a follow-up to this, part B. We are asked if Jocelyn wants to catch the ball at the same height at which she threw it from, how many seconds would it take for the ball to reach that height? So we're going to follow a very similar process, but our difference this time is instead of us wanting the ball to be caught at 0 at the ground, we want her to catch it at the same height that she threw it, which was 240. So the only difference is instead of plugging in the 0 like we did for the height at the beginning, we're going to plug in 240 feet because that's going to be the height that it was thrown. Everything else is going to be the same. We're still going to have negative 16t squared. We're still going to have plus 32t. And we're still going to have plus 240. And this is all coming from our equation that we had up here. Now remember, before we can factor, we have to have one side equal to 0. So we're going to subtract 240 from both sides. That's going to give us 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 32. The next thing that we're going to want to do is to go ahead and pull out a GCF. We are still going to have that negative 16, and I left off a t here. But if you notice, we're also going to pull out a t from here. Both our terms that are remaining have a t. This is going to be like that example we looked at where c was equal to 0. So when we look at what's left, if we pull negative 16t out of t squared, we're just going to have t left. And if we pull a negative 16t out of 32t, we're just going to have a minus 2. So we're actually already factored. We just need to set these two factors equal to 0. So we'll do negative 16t equals 0 and t minus 2 equals 0. We'll divide both sides on this one by negative 16. We'll get t equals 0. And then on the right, we're going to have t plus equals positive 2 when we add 2 to both sides. Again, we need to think about the circumstances that we're being asked about. We are told that Jocelyn wants to catch the ball at the same height at which she threw it, so it's going to be at that height 2 different times. And what those 2 times are going to be are 0 seconds and 2 seconds. Now we are interested in the time that she caught it. The 0 is going to be when she threw it, because when she's just launching it, no time has passed at the very second that she's throwing it. So this is going to be when we were throwing the ball. And then our 2 is going to be when we are catching. So our final answer is going to be the 2 seconds. We want that second time where the ball is going up and then coming back down. And just a nice little visual illustration to talk about. This would be her standing on the cliff at 240 feet. This is her throwing the ball. She wants someone to catch it right here at the same height. So that would be the second time that we hit 240 feet. And then the 0 that we talked about earlier would be all the way down here. So that is going to, in summary, be our answer is 2 seconds. That's going to wrap up our word problems as well as our video series on 5-3. This is going to be a more challenging section. Stick with it, be persistent, ask as many questions as you need to for help. We'll be glad to help you out. Make sure that you do all the practice because there are so many different types of problems that you will see with factoring before you take the mastery check. Alright, see you guys in the next lesson.